The smell of burnt toast from the break room and the hum of cheap overhead lights already had Debra Ellis rubbing her temples when the team's ping lit up her screen. Urgent prod is down. Invoice screen frozen. Need hot fix ASAP. It was 7:46 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Debra was still wearing her coat. By 8:12, it was fixed, not because anyone thanked her, but because no one else remembered where the rollback patch lived. Not even the junior infrastructure guy who once asked if SFTP was a brand of printer. Debra, 58, had worked at Marigold Systems for nearly a decade. She was the duct tape, the whisper in the logs, the ghost behind every clean deployment. She didn't complain. She didn't take PTO. She hadn't been out of the office for more than 24 hours since 2021. Not because she was trying to prove anything, because if she wasn't there, things quietly fell apart. Stupidly, silently, reversibly, sure, but only if she was the one to fix them. By 8:30, she was in a windowless basement conference room watching the company's new CTO drone through a pastel-colored PowerPoint about post-deployment evolution. There was a slide with a Shutterstock woman smiling at a laptop. It wasn't Debra. Debra's laptop looked like it had been through 4 mergers and a flood. And it had. The flood's name was Jenkins. She kept her face neutral while the CTO used the word automation like it was a sacred text. Debra had built the automation. She duct-taped cron jobs to Teams alerts and hooked patch scripts to backup triggers, like she was conducting a symphony of sleepless nights. But automation still needs a conductor. Without her, it was just a fire in a vending machine. Oh, and hey, if you're still with me, clearly you've got good taste for digital revenge stories. Mind hitting subscribe and dropping a like. Only 3% of y'all are subscribed, and this caffeine doesn't pay for itself. Anyway, no one ever asked Debra how it all worked. They just assumed it would. So when the streamlining memo dropped less than 24 hours after she completed the largest system upgrade in the company's history, she wasn't surprised. Not even a little. She just smiled. Because she knew exactly what they'd broken. And they didn't. Not yet. That's why when her manager pinged her at 6:03 p.m., the message didn't even faze her. CTO says you need to handle tomorrow's rollout. You're the only one who won't mess it up. Debra didn't reply with thanks. She replied, send me the build ticket. The update was a Frankenstein monster. A database version, jump a full API refactor, a container orchestration overhaul, all fused together with optimism and duct tape. One wrong move and the system would eat itself alive. Debra approached it like surgery. No wasted motion, no distractions. By 8:00 p.m., she had 3 black coffees lined up and a heating pad on her lower back. By 11:30, younger engineers were hovering behind her like wide-eyed interns at a magic show, whispering while she reloaded container clusters in live staging without flinching. She didn't care about praise. She cared about clean logs. At 2:37 a.m., it was done. No errors, no warnings, no known issues to monitor. She leaned back in her worn desk chair, stared at the passing log stream, and whispered, still got it. But Debra also knew what came next. They'd lean on her again. Until they didn't. She drove home with aching hands and humming nerves. Not afraid, not angry, just aware. Something inside her had shifted. Not fear, not sadness, anticipation. Because the ghost behind every flawless release wasn't just useful. She was vital. And this company had no clue how close they were to collapse. At 9:02 a.m., her inbox chimed, subject great work on Q3 infrastructure upgrade 2 bullet points. Deployment flawless. Under budget. No thank you, no context, just a PNG of fireworks and a smiley face signed by the CTO himself. Jeremy Laird, a man who said agile in every sentence like it was trademarked. Debra sipped cold coffee and stared at it. Then, 9:07 a.m., new calendar invite, subject organizational realignment location HR, room 2B attendees Debra Ellis, Jeremy Laird, and Paula from HR, who once gave her a box of tissues for Employee Appreciation Week. Debra already knew. You don't schedule a surprise meeting after a flawless deployment unless you're walking someone out. And this time, it was her turn. And so, Jeremy said, dragging out the words like they physically pained him, the company's entering a new phase of operational efficiency. We've reviewed the org structure and determined that your role is now considered redundant. Redundant, like an old modem in a 5G world. Debra nodded cool as a January breeze. Is there a transition period? Documentation transfer? Am I expected to train someone? Jeremy actually chuckled. Well, I mean, it's all automated now, right? Jenkins handles the workflows. You said that yourself. Then he tossed in a smirk so smug it could have been framed. You basically made yourself replaceable. That's good engineering, right? Paula from HR slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Debra didn't touch it. Inside her brain was a live wire. You condescending Excel file in a suit. You think Jenkins manages IAM policies? You think Terraform spins itself up over coffee. On the outside, stillness. No rage, no tears, just one long blink. I'll need to gather my things, she said quietly. Jeremy waved it off like she'd asked for a breath mint. Already done. Security has your badge. Escorted. Not a criminal, not a thief, just another obsolete asset. The walkout didn't feel real. She passed the break room, where she'd once rebuilt the invoice server mid-fire drill, past the whiteboard where she'd mapped the new CI/CD flow, while two interns debated whether to use Comic Sans for fun. At the lobby, security handed her a cardboard box. Inside her thermal mug, a tiny cactus with 3 brown leaves and a post-it from Q1 Restart solves 90% of problems. She stepped into the parking lot, box in hand. Badge now trash. 6 years. 6 years she held this place together like fishing line on a crumbling dock. She should have felt angry, or broken, or embarrassed. But mostly detached, like she was watching herself from outside the glass. The Oklahoma sky hung low and dull, just enough cloud to mute everything. Debra didn't cry. She just opened the car door, placed the box down, and whispered to no one, "Let's see what happens when Jenkins forgets who trained him." By noon, the texts were already coming in. "You got let go? Please tell me. That's a mistake." "Deb, what the hell just happened?" She didn't answer. "Not yet, Debra. They can't do that. Not after what you just pulled off." Her phone buzzed again, jittering across the kitchen counter next to a half-eaten granola bar and the still unopened termination letter. She didn't move. Not yet. She sat still, coat still on, staring through the window at the brittle Oklahoma maple in her yard, its leaves falling like quiet resignation. Something was ending, and the tree knew it before she did. Her group chat Push or Perish, named as a joke but now reading like prophecy, was already half a mutiny in motion. Jules UI lead. You need to lawyer up. This is garbage. Kev DevOps. Jenkins is choking. API refresh is failing. No one knows where the token vault is. Maya now at Stripe file a claim. Age discrimination. You know that's what this is. Liam. Just tweet about it. Watch how fast this explodes. Debra didn't reply. Just sipped the microwaved coffee from her company mug. Ship happens. Now ironic. No anger. No drama. Just instinct. She opened her laptop. Navigated to the deployment license portal, the same one she'd set up herself 6 months earlier when Jeremy waved off procurement like it was red tape. "Just use your personal key for now," he'd said. "We'll sort it out after Q3. She had that email. Not that she needed it. The screen lit up. Her name. Her email. Debra Ellis. Active license holder. Most recent deployment 6 hours ago. Attached projects prod billing API 8 main UI 8 cloud ops 8 tools. License expiration January 12th, 2026. They'd never migrated anything. Not once. The entire infrastructure rollout Jeremy had bragged about on Slack last night, still running on her personal license. Legally owned, non-transferable, bound to her machine. her name. If you found a little piece of yourself in this story, quiet strength, calm retaliation, or just the satisfaction of watching competence win, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. She stared at the terminal, not out of spite, but out of certainty. This wasn't payback. It was their failure. The Jenkins pipeline authenticated through her credentials. The AWS permissions, all tied to her temporary IIM role, never replaced. The billing dashboard that ran every monthly report? Yeah, that too. And then it came, one of those forgotten memories from a caffeine-blurred night. Jeremy, arms folded outside her cubicle like a motivational poster, smirking. "You're just so dependable, Debra. We're lucky you don't make us write everything down." Now, they were about to pay for it. "We're lucky you're not one of those types who needs everything formalized in triplicate," Jeremy once joked. No, Jeremy, you weren't lucky she was flexible. You were lucky she was loyal, not naive. And now the system you kicked her out of. It was floating on a raft you never even knew she built. She could sink it. One command, she wouldn't. But she could. Debra closed the terminal, walked into her bedroom, took a long hot shower that didn't feel deserved, but absolutely felt necessary. No calls to HR, no threats, no noise. Just a new text document, titled plainly, "When They Think Jenkins Replaces People." The cursor blinked at her like a challenge. She typed the command deactivate key. Scope. Global. It wasn't just a kill switch. It was wrapped in logic checks. Fail-safes she'd built herself to prevent misuse. No rogue ops. No messy shutdowns. But now, she was the rogue op. The system trusted her too much to stop her. She hovered over the enter key. She could let it ride. Let them keep using her access like nothing had happened. Let Jeremy throw another budget wine party and toast scalable architecture without knowing what he was standing on. But this wasn't anger. It was arithmetic. She'd read the contract front to back. Her name was on the license, not the company's. She paid the subscription herself on her personal credit card because finance didn't support non-standard vendors yet. She hit enter. The command line interface blinked. Key revoked. Sessions terminated. Warning. Dependent systems may be impacted. She stared at the screen like it might yell. It didn't. No errors, no alarms, just silence. It wasn't a bomb. It was a vacuum. And inside it, every system built on her back began quietly unraveling. She packed her laptop, zipped it into its sleeve, threw on the old hoodie she wore during marathon deploys, and left the apartment like someone heading to court, not to argue, just to observe. At 9:42 a.m., she parked across from the office. Same bland building, same cracked pavement, same half-dead shrubs. The coffee she brought was already cold, but Debra wasn't there to drink it. She was there to watch. No screen, no signal. Just the slow, certain consequences. Just Debra sitting alone in the driver's seat, fingers wrapped around a cooling cardboard coffee cup, watching from across the street like the ghost they'd quietly made her into. Somewhere inside that bland gray building with fogged-up windows and buzzing lights, Jenkins was already gasping for air. The vault tokens, dead. The deployment pipeline, stuck mid-handshake. The billing API refusing to fetch. Audit logs, spitting out error codes no one could translate. But Debra didn't need confirmation. She wasn't looking for proof. She was looking for distance. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the gravity of what she'd just done. A clean surgical no to a system that fed off her until she was disposable. This wasn't revenge. This was liberation. She wasn't destroying anything. She was removing herself from a machine that never even said her name out loud. Breathing in, she exhaled 6 years of invisible labor. No headlines, no drama, no crash. Just Debra Ellis, quietly logged out, but never powerless. Across the street, the countdown had begun. 10:01 a.m. Slack lit up. Alerts channel deployment queue stuck. Jenkins retrying. No panic. Jenkins hiccups. They'd curse it and reboot. 10:07 second ping. Vault token expired. Reauthentication failed. Then came the PagerDuty sirens. 3 engineers scrambled toward DevOps like ferrets on espresso. Jeremy, the CTO, was in a meeting titled Post-Deployment PR Opportunities when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. He was busy choosing LinkedIn hashtags. My flawless transition, legacy optimized 10. 13 Slack exploded. CD builds failing. Who rotated the keys? Vault hash is dead. Can't pull tokens. Billing dashboard shows $0 revenue for Q3. Didn't Debra handle that? Wait, is Debra still here? No. They let her go. Holy crap, who has her credentials? By 10:18, the dev floor split into factions like it was Friday afternoon at a middle school dodgeball game. DevOps blamed Jenkins. Jenkins blamed token configs. UI was firing hotfixes into a void. Nothing stuck. Amber, a junior, hired 2 months out of boot camp, whispered, "Didn't Debra handle the vault bindings?" No one answered. They were all too busy screaming over each other like barnyard roosters mid-bonfire. 10:21 a.m. Jeremy kicked open the DevOps door. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, his voice cracked. Not from rage, from panic. Kev from DevOps looked up from 3 failing monitors sweat pooling above his collar. "You tell us, man. Jenkins can't push? Faults are offline." No one knows who last rotated the deployment keys. Jeremy pinched the bridge of his nose, like that alone could conjure a solution. "Reboot it. Restore the last config." Kev didn't flinch. "We can't. The last config is locked," he said, voice tightening. "Credentials are invalid." He looked around the room, scanning faces. "It's like we've been cut out." The room went still. Jeremy's jaw flexed. "Someone messed with access levels," he muttered. "Who had super admin?" Then from the far end of the room, Amber, the new hire still too polite to breathe loudly, spoke up barely audible. "I think Debra did." Jeremy's head whipped toward her like she'd shouted in church. "She's gone?" he snapped. "Right," Kev said slowly, dragging out the word like it had teeth. "And you never transitioned her role, never revoked her license, never migrated anything. You just assumed Jenkins would run everything like magic." Jeremy's voice dropped to a growl. "You're saying our infrastructure is down because some bitter ex-employee yanked her key?" "I'm saying," Kev replied, leaning back in his chair, "our infrastructure is down because the only person who actually understood it walked out with a cardboard box and no handoff. The fire alarm didn't go off, but it might as well have." Voices rose. Phones rang. Laptops spun in endless retry loops. Marketing couldn't access their Q3 dashboard. Finance couldn't verify billing data. Product didn't even know if last night's release had gone live. Spoiler, it hadn't. Jeremy charged into the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. "Get me legal, now." Then louder, "Who revoked our cloud access?" But the walls didn't answer. Neither did Jenkins. 11:04 a.m. A call from Midcon Solutions, their top logistics client. 42% of their Q3 revenue. 2 words, transaction delays. 11:07. Status escalated to critical. 11:10. Legal. Was scrambling on a 3-way call with IT and finance, digging for any clause that might buy time. There wasn't one. Debra had written the integration herself. And now, the backend was blindfolded and screaming into the void. 11:15. HR tried everything. Office phone, email, even LinkedIn. No response. Just a seen timestamp on her last message. And silence. "Hope you're settling in. Okay, post-transition. Let us know if you need a letter of recommendation." That was the email from HR. Debra didn't open it. She was too busy watching a pot of water boil, not because she needed tea, but because the metaphor pleased her. Heat, tension, slow transformation. Her living room was quiet, save for the occasional Slack ping from her personal account. Muted. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table. Screen softly lit. Directory highlighted in all caps. "Do not delete. Debra, deploy keys." She clicked. Vault tokens. Jenkins bindings. Shell scripts full of snarky comments. Temp, keys, my ass. If you're reading this, congrats. You screwed up. She leaned back into the couch. Not smug, not bitter. Just that quiet, exhausted grin of someone who once asked for a proper handoff meeting and was told, let's circle back after Q3. At 11:23 a.m., she opened a fresh Google Doc. Title invoice, emergency consulting retainer. She filled it in slowly, methodically, no rush. She was the only bridge left between functionality and a company-wide meltdown. 420-hour, 8-hour minimum block. Line items. Deployment reactivation, vault restoration, CI/CD triage, Jenkins credential rebinding rush fee, applied terms, prepaid. Net, 0. She attached her EIN and added one last line. Please direct all inquiries through legal or board contacts. I do not respond to Slack. By 11:30, she hit save. Exported to PDF. Still hadn't picked up a single call. Let them sweat. Let it escalate. Another buzz. Private number. She let it ring twice, then answered. This is Debra. A man's voice on the other end. Older, composed. Miss Ellis. This is Richard Kimball. I'm on the board. We're trying to get clarity on a situation involving system access and key dependencies. She smiled gently, stood stretching like a house cat waking from a long nap, her voice calm. I imagine you are. Because in that moment, Debra wasn't a ghost. She was the fire alarm they forgot to install. And now, it was already burning, ready to continue to the negotiation scene. I imagine you are, Debra said, already clicking. Send on the invoice. Are you able to assist? That depends, she replied calmly. I'm no longer an employee. If you'd like my help, you'll need to retain me as a contractor. A pause on the line. Anything. Then, Richard asked. Understood. Please send terms. Already did, she said, sipping the tea she hadn't brewed yet. Clock starts when payment clears. Click. By 12:00 p.m., Jeremy had sweat through the armpits of his designer button-down and was on his third. We're looking into an email to Midcon Solutions CIO who was no longer buying the act. Client logs were filled with failed post requests, broken token handshakes, and a complete halt in invoice generation. This whole system is duct-taped together. The Midcon rep growled. If this isn't resolved by Cobb, we're pulling the plug. That's when the board stepped in. Jeremy was yanked out of the chaos and pulled into a video call with 3 senior board members, all of whom looked like they just found mold in their investment portfolio. Richard Kimball, the same Richard who'd called Debra, opened with a quiet hammer. Why does our infrastructure appear to be held together by a single person? You fired, Jeremy scrambled. It's Jenkins-based. Everything's automated. She, Debra, was legacy. We're shifting to a more scalable model. Richard didn't blink. Your scalable model just lost access to the vault. The silence that followed hit like a dropped guillotine. I'm escalating this, Richard said firmly. You had your shot? I'll take it from here. He ended the call and redialed Debra this time with the urgency of someone finally recognizing who held the keys. She answered on the second ring. Debra Ellis. It's Richard again, he said. I've reviewed your invoice. Before we proceed, can you clarify what happened? Debra didn't sigh, didn't raise her voice. Your CTO terminated the only person with an active deployment license. Pause. He told me Jenkins was automated enough to replace me. Pause. It isn't. And the vault, Richard asked, already bracing. Authorized through my personal license. Non-transferable. Tied to my cloud account, I reminded them. No one followed up. Another pause. Can you help us? Yes, Debra replied. But you'll need to retain me properly. We're prepared to do that, Richard said. Do you have a contract-ready invoice sent? Debra replied. Scope listed. Once payment clears, I'll walk someone through the first steps. There was a pause. We'd prefer if... You handled the fix yourself, Richard added. Debra smiled, not smug, just steady. That's extra. Richard gave a single dry laugh. Of course it is. He ended the call and immediately fired off a memo to legal and finance approve Debra Ellis's consulting terms immediately. All in-house efforts have failed. We follow her lead. An hour later, Debra's PayPal pinged. $3,360 received. Note emergency retainer. Phase 1. She cracked her knuckles and reopened the vault documentation. Back at the office, Jeremy sat hunched at his desk while a Slack thread titled, Emergency Consultant Debra Ellis, exploded with 130 reactions, half of them clown emojis. Most aimed at him. Public humiliation. That was just warming up. At 2:03 p.m., sharp the Zoom call launched. No greetings, no chit-chat. Just Debra's initials in the waiting room like a silent countdown clock. Richard admitted her. 6 board members stared at the screen. One had a barbecue stain on his tie. Another looked like she'd been crying. All of them stared at Debra as if she were both the ghost of Christmas past and the only contractor who could stop the building from catching fire. Jeremy sat there, too pale, stiff jaw clenched like it was holding in a scream. The sweat on his forehead told her everything. Ms. Ellis, Richard said in his boardroom voice, "Thank you for joining us." Debra unmuted. No makeup, hair pulled into a low bun, her background blurred except for a cat tree peeking through. None of it mattered. She radiated command. "I understand you need a briefing," she said. She shared her screen, opened her terminal, and dissected the collapse like a surgeon. "This," she said, highlighting lines of Jason, "is where Jenkins failed to handshake with the vault. Token expired. No one rotated credentials. Scroll. This is the API failing to connect with Midcon's billing system. Right now, you're running manual invoices with zero validation. If you push another batch," she glanced up, "your financial layer could implode." This, Debra continued, highlighting a section of terminal output, is where the CI/CD pipeline stalled. The runner environment no longer recognizes any active key bindings. Silence. She stopped screen sharing. Jeremy cleared his throat. "Okay, but excuse me, let's not frame this as intentional sabotage. Clearly there was a miscommunication." Debra didn't blink. "Jeremy," she said evenly, "I revoked my personal license. The one I paid for. The one I reminded your team to replace. Twice." Before he could object again, Richard's voice cut in calm and final. "Ms. Ellis, what are your terms?" Debra already had them open in a PDF. 3-month contract. Non-negotiable, she said. Upfront payment for the first month before any work begins. No handoff until the final week. All credentials migrated under proper legal ownership. She paused. "And I want the NDA lifted." A murmur rippled through the Zoom. "I want the right to write about this anonymously on my blog. No names, no company identifiers. Just a case study on what happens when a company tries to automate a human being out of existence." The legal counsel shifted in her chair. "That's unorthodox," she said, eyes flicking to the board. Jeremy jumped in, his voice tight. "You can't be serious. This is extortion?" Debra looked directly into her webcam. Her tone didn't waver. "No, this is consulting. You wanted a discount when you assumed I had no leverage. You fired the human behind your automation. Now you pay full price." Jeremy opened his mouth again, but Richard raised a single hand. "Approved," he said, voice like a gavel. "All of it." Legal sighed. "We'll prepare the paperwork." Jeremy slammed his laptop closed and dropped off the call without a word. Debra stayed on a moment longer. No gloating, no smile. Just this: "I'll expect payment confirmation within the hour. And someone should start exporting incident logs. You'll need them." She left the meeting. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. $12,600 received. Note, month 1 of 3. Retainer Debra Ellis. Consulting terms of surrender accepted. She didn't move until the wire cleared. And when it did, the repair began. On her terms. Then methodically, like a safecracker in a sanctuary, Debra opened her terminal. She generated a fresh token. Re-authenticated the vault. The system didn't roar back. It exhaled like a body that had been holding its breath for days. API logs began to flow again. Jenkins stopped spinning like a drunk toddler. The CI/CD runner pinged a quiet message, connected. Pipeline restored. Debra didn't celebrate, didn't smirk. She just nodded, then opened a notepad file labeled Onboarding for People Who Can Read. TXT Step 1. Delete everything Jeremy touched. For the next 48 hours, she rebuilt the infrastructure from the bones up. A brand new credential schema, refactored vault access, so no one, not even her, held the master key alone. She peppered the pipeline with quiet warnings. This should never happen again. If it does, you deserve it. By the end of day 3, it all purred. Quiet, stable, obedient. Exactly how she liked it. That's when the internal memo leaked, forwarded to her inbox from a friend still on the inside. Subject: New Access Protocol from Board Admin. Going forward, all infrastructure deployment access will be managed by external consultant Debra Ellis. Contact IT for credentials. Do not attempt to alter architecture without written approval. At the bottom, a new name. Jeremy's was gone. 1 week later, the company quietly announced his resignation. Personal health reasons. The comment thread. A forest of polite reactions and popcorn emojis. Interns whispered about the Jenkins collapse like it was folklore. Debra didn't respond. She just opened LinkedIn, clicked Edit Profile Idle Cloud Consultant. Remote. Available. I bring systems back from the dead. Don't make me prove it again. Only then did she pour herself a glass of good wine. Not for the win, for closure. They said she was outdated. That automation could replace her. That the system could hum without her. But the truth, it lived in every clean server, every quiet log. They said she was no longer needed. Turns out she was the lock and the key. She never yelled, never begged. She let their negligence speak for her. And that's power. If you made it this far, thank you. I wasn't supposed to matter. Not in that boardroom. Not in their plans. Not in the world where automation is a buzzword and loyalty is treated like a line item. But I did matter, and so do you. If you've ever held a place together quietly without fanfare while others collected the credit, then I hope this story felt personal. Drop a comment below, not for me, but for every Debra you've worked with. For the people who taught themselves systems after hours, who trained interns without recognition, who kept the lights on and the logs clean. I read every single one. And if you've been made to feel invisible, here's the truth. You're not replaceable. You're just underestimated. Sometimes the best response isn't rage, it's resilience. It's knowing when to walk away and when to walk back in holding the keys. Support stories like mine by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Not because it feeds the algorithm, but because it keeps these voices alive. Let them know we're not gone. We're just charging consulting rates now. And that's called knowing your worth.